U.S. CENTCOM destroys 3 Houthi terrorist anti-ship missiles as part of ongoing efforts to protect freedom of navigation and prevent attacks on maritime vessels. U.S. Navy ships are present in the Red Sea. On January 19th at approximately 6:45 p.m., U.S. Central Command forces conducted strikes against 3 Houthi anti-ship missiles that were aimed into the southern Red Sea and were prepared to launch. We want to get into this new development with national security analyst, our friend here, Hal Kempfer, retired Marines intelligence officer, host of the Strat podcast. Hal, we've had you on a couple of times today, but this is big stuff that we have to talk about. So I want you to tell us a little bit about what you know about this latest strike from the U.S. against Houthi rebels.
Well, the latest strike was following an attack, Carel, where basically the Houthis launched what appeared to have been a drone against a U.S.-owned tanker. That drone didn't make it, but what we did was we picked up on 3 missiles being ready for launch, and this is very similar to what we've seen with some of the other strikes, particularly after the first big wave of strikes. We went after 100 different targets, so to speak, or we used 100 different missiles and various forms of ordnance to take them out. Since then, as we see a missile or drones being readied for launch, we basically put a mission on them. We target them, and we take them out. And part of that has to do with where those drones and missiles are. Obviously, they're not storing them out in the open, where we can see them and we could just target them easily. They're pulling them out of someplace, a bunker, a revetment, possibly some sort of cave, or not so much a cave, really a reinforced tunnel, someplace that's difficult to hit. But at some point, they have to take them outside. They have to get them ready for launch. And during that window of essentially vulnerability, we put a mission on them. One of the things that we have, a capability that they don't have, is phenomenal intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance capabilities. And what we're able to do is basically, as we used to call it, sensor to target, which is we pick up on the threat and then we're very quickly able to turn that around into a target mission, whether it's using F-18s dropping things from the sky, or it's using Tomahawk missiles. And I'm sure we've been using a lot of Tomahawk missiles. In fact, I know we've been using a lot of Tomahawk missiles. Whatever it is, and we take the missiles out. Now, all of this is in context. John Kirby, spokesman for the National Security Council, was basically asked today, have we taken out the Houthi capabilities? And the reality is, we're never going to be able to eliminate the Houthis. It's certainly the Saudis tried with the actual de jure Yemeni government to try and take out the Houthis. They did that for many years. It didn't work. There's now a call from the Yemeni government to do ground action against the Houthis. I don't know if anybody's anxious to join them in that endeavor, but what I do know is that they have to use sensors. Now, the optical stuff is tough, but one of the things about the terrain, which is different than other parts of the Middle East, is it's very mountainous. So they can have people on high ground using optical sensors. In some cases, literally looking out there with binoculars or something and figuring out where maritime targets are, going through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, up to the Red Sea, and they can actually target them that way. However, with other sensors like maritime radars and stuff, there's not that many of those. So there is the ability to effectively blind them, if you will, from being able to detect ships at sea. And then they have limited means to attack them with. And we can pick up on that with our sensors. And we can not only intercept them as they're inbound after they've been launched, but as we've seen here, we can intercept them as they're being ready for launch and take them out on the ground. And at some point, there will be enough degradation where they don't pose as significant a threat to maritime shipping in that critical sea lane.
How what you're saying here is that this is going to take some time. So how does the U.S. continue to fight against the Houthis, continue to deter them without getting into a wider conflict, without making it much more catastrophic in that region?
Well, I think right now what you're going to see is I'm not ruling out that you might might see, and I brought this up earlier, is we might see raids. I don't see us taking ground, but I could see we have a variety of means ourselves. Certainly, the United Kingdom has specialized units that can do certain types of things like raids to go in and take out areas. And those would be for primarily destruction, to destroy their capabilities. The things they can hit us with, they can hit anti-ship missiles. They can use drones that fly in the sky, and then they have things at sea. Some of those they have used unmanned surface vessels as weapons, but also manned surface vessels as weapons, and all of those things can be effectively targeted and taken out. And I think what you're going to see is just this steady attrition, if you will, of Houthi capabilities specifically aimed at what they can do to intercept, disrupt maritime shipping. Interestingly, what just came out was that the Chinese, and as you know, the Chinese have a very close relationship with Iran. They have an extremely close relationship with Russia. Russia has an extremely close relationship with Iran. Iran is the primary backer of the Houthis. But China also has global interests. It has this Belt and Road Initiative around the world, but it also has very extended supply lines. They too are reliant on the Red Sea to move a lot of their goods back and forth with Europe and the rest of the world. It's a vital sea lane for them. They've also come out and said that this disruption of shipping in the Red Sea has to stop. And I was kind of waiting for that. They seem to be dragging their feet behind the rest of the world, even though their commercial interests were there. Their political interests were not completely aligned with their commercial interests or pragmatic interests, if you will. And I think the pragmatic side is kind of weighed out, and they finally said that. Now, does that mean that the Chinese will join the rest of the task force and targeting Houthi anti-ship capabilities? I wouldn't hold my breath on that. I just don't see them doing that. They wouldn't even join us with the anti uh, piracy initiative that we had out there. But it is good that at least they're saying politically on the world stage, the Houthi anti-ship capability has to stop, and that gives us more gravitas. And also, remember, the UN gave a final warning before we launched any strikes. It was a last and final warning, very much akin to what we said, that the Houthis had to stop doing this. So there's a difference between this and, I would say, Gaza. Gaza, there's a lot of international condemnation of what Israel's doing. There's a definite split amongst various countries in the world in terms of how they see Israel prosecuting that war. Maybe the necessity for Israel's continued prosecution of that war, many calls for immediate ceasefire. Completely different with the Houthis. The Houthis, there seems to be, with the exception of Russia and certainly Iran, there seems to be a lot of unity, which is the Houthi anti-ship threat has to be stopped. And I think that very much works in our favor in terms of putting political pressure on not just the Houthis directly, but the Houthis indirectly, putting pressure on Iran to withhold weapons and support from the Houthis, but also to provide some direction to the Houthis to say, basically, you need to stop doing this. It's counterproductive.
Okay, but is this pressure going to actually be effective? Is Iran going to listen eventually? Let's say, because right now it just sounds like, for example, a mischievous kid is just kind of doing all of these things. It doesn't really seem to be a target. You got basically the entire international community, including those that have a close relationship with Iran, saying, don't do this, stop. And yet it continues. Is there even a bigger end game? Is there a bigger goal here? How long until Iran kind of backs off?
Well, it's a deadly mischievous kid because of what they're doing. The type of weapons they're using. But it is mischievous. You're absolutely correct. And the question is can they be brought into some sort of behavioral norm, if you will? The problem is they're not a nation state. They're essentially a big rebel terrorist group that controls a lot of territory in Yemen, and they have de facto control. They have no de jure recognition, and so uh, the question is, can how do we control them? Well, Yemen's saying, look, we need to go back on a ground offensive against them. I don't think Saudi Arabia is in any way anxious to go and to get involved on the ground again. Neither is the United Arab Emirates. They did both of that with the de jure Yemeni government for years, and that just didn't make a lot of headway. Although in this case, the Yemenis have done something, or I should say, the Houthis have done something that they haven't done before, which is they've threatened global shipping, and of importance is they've also threatened a vital economics an economic linchpin of Egypt, the Suez Canal. I mean, that's a huge key source of revenue. It's probably one of the most, if not the most important things that the Egypt has in terms of making revenue around the world, and they have dramatically decreased it. I know it was a couple weeks ago; it was down 30%. It's probably more than that now, and in terms of the shipping going through there, and so you have a lot of countries around there that if they want to step in, if the Houthis cannot be deterred, that they could bring more forces to bear. And at that point, I would say, if the Houthis really keep up doing this, I do think that enough could be brought to bear that you could see something much broader than what we're seeing now. But right now, I think you're going to continue to see much of the same. The Houthis will try to launch drones and missiles at ships. And as we see them, either after they launch or preferably before they launch, we're going to try and take them out. With that said, though, I still think there is the possibility that at some point we may go in there a little bit, even more preemptively, and maybe actually do something at those sites where they store those missiles. And I don't rule out some sort of raid sort of thing that could happen. I don't know who would do it. It could be us. It could be a regional neighbor. It could be someone else. It could be the British that do something. But there's certainly more than enough countries involved that if this keeps up and the pain is felt, and if you see dramatic increases in prices, if you will, from basically shutting down the Suez Canal and shutting down the Red Sea, if you start seeing that really hitting people in the store shelves and their pocketbooks, you're going to find a lot of political pressure everywhere to do something. And politicians listen to political pressure to do something. And as I think it was Clausewitz that said, war is politics by other means. And so we may see something even broader, much more targeted, maybe even some sort of boots on the ground thing in the future.
Al, I do want to get you to comment on the quality of munitions, excuse me, that we're seeing here. The anti-ship missiles that are being launched by Houthis, how effective are they when they're launched? Clearly, we're taking preventative action to keep those from being launched in the first place. So, are we talking about some sophisticated technology here?
Actually, they've got some pretty good stuff. The Iranians are backing them. The Iranians have some fairly sophisticated missiles. I'm sure the Chinese are out there watching what we're doing very carefully. That's been discussed quite a bit. As the Chinese are getting a demonstration on how the Navy intercepts drones and missiles, and so our ships are sitting off the coast, and they are intercepting drones and missiles. But yes, those anti-ship missiles, some of them just were not performing very well initially, but they have some that have struck. Now, one thing that has been noted is they don't seem to have significant warheads. We're seeing strikes, but we're not seeing catastrophic strikes on ships. And keep in mind, the ships they're hitting are commercial ships. They're not hitting warships, and warships tend to have much thicker holes. All right, because they are basically designed to take impact from kinetic weapons and keep on moving, whereas commercial ships aren't really designed to do that. But what we have seen is they've certainly, they struck them, they started some fires, they've caused some problems, but knock on wood, we have not seen any ships being severely hit to the point where they were threatened with sinking or something like that. So, yes, it's a significant array of weaponry, but it's not the not the worst that we've seen out there in the world of anti-ship weapons. The Chinese have some anti-ship missiles that are certainly much more dangerous than what we've seen the Houthis using.
All right, Hal, we are going to leave it at that. Always so much more to discuss, but of course, we have a lot of time as this continues to escalate over there. The sixth strike by the U.S. against Houthi targets in Yemen. So, more likely than not, it will continue. And we'll bring you back here for all of that analysis. Hal Kempfer, retired Marines intelligence officer, host of the Strat podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carel.